very much. Thank you, Doug, and I'm delighted to be here. I love coming to Portsmouth. I love coming to the seacoast. And as I was saying to the folks I was sitting with, and when Doug was talking about what's going, there's always so much going on in Portsmouth. We have the Market Square Days coming up. We have the Chowder Fest, the tall ships. I'm always amazed at how many people from all over New Hampshire come to Portsmouth for these very, very special events. And it's well deserved. Certainly Portsmouth has changed, as I mentioned last time I was here, from the first time I came here back in the early 70s when I was a student at UNH. Back then I think the only place you could go to eat was Gillies. We didn't have all these fancy restaurants in Portsmouth as we do today. And back then I think the only entree you could get was Frankfurts and beans at Gillies. That was the extent of it. I do want to say a special hello to Jay Gibson, who's here. Jay is retiring from the Piscataqua Savings Bank after 40 years. And it's very rare in this world that somebody goes to a company, whether it's in New Hampshire or anywhere else, and stays with a company that long. I mean, it's really a remarkable degree of loyalty and commitment and dedication. So I think we should give Jay Gibson a round of applause. Now, some of you think erroneously that Jay Gibson's claim to fame is that he was CEO of Piscataqua Savings Bank. That's not true. His real claim to fame, that he was my big brother at SAU fraternity at UNH back in the early 70s. That's where he got his start. Now, you cannot take the floor. I have the mic. Now, Jay and I, we have a pact that we're not going to tell stories about each other until after. I'm not sure whether, Jay, it's after we retire or after we're dead. But I won't get into Jay Gibson's stories. But anyway, Jay's a very good friend. Our families are good friends. Our kids are good friends. And I'm honored to have him as a friend. So, Jay, thanks for all you've done. I thought I would talk a little bit about what's going on in New Hampshire and then answer any questions which you have for me. As Doug mentioned, and I talked about this a little bit last time, since we last met, New Hampshire has again been ranked as the most livable state in the nation. Since last we met, New Hampshire again has been acknowledged as the safest state in the nation by Kids Count, which is a nonpartisan organization located in Washington. New Hampshire again was ranked as the best place in the country in which to raise kids. What's going on? I mean, New Hampshire continues to come out on top of all these ratings. Our unemployment rate is 40% below the national average. There are only 3 states in the country which have a lower unemployment rate than New Hampshire. And quite frankly, those 3 states don't count. We're always considered one of the healthiest states. That's off the record. We're getting calls from these other governors this afternoon. New Hampshire is always considered one of the healthiest states, the best educated states, one of the wealthiest states, and we do all of it without a sales tax, with no income tax, no capital gains, and no estate tax. So how does it all happen? How does it all work? As I tell people in Concord and elsewhere around New Hampshire, we have a strategy here in New Hampshire that works. Just like you and your businesses, like the Piscataqua Savings Bank has a strategy that works. And when you have a strategy, don't mess it up. It's okay to make changes, and certainly you have to change and adapt with the times, but don't mess up a strategy that's already working. I tell this to our legislative colleagues as they've introduced a myriad of bills that will, in some cases, I think, move New Hampshire backwards, not move New Hampshire forwards. I think a key part of our strategy is education. And I talk about education all the time. To me, education is basically about opportunity. The opportunity that we offer to our children to have better lives, the opportunity that we offer to them to get good jobs, to go on to higher education if that's what they choose to do, to be able to provide for themselves and their families. And I certainly believe that in New Hampshire, all of our children deserve the opportunity to get a good education, regardless of where they live, regardless of their economic background. Now, one of the areas I focused on as governor is lowering the high school dropout rate. And it's really amazing. I go to these governor's meetings, and we talk about what we worry about when we wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and governors tell me they worry about their high school dropout rates and how it's negatively impacting the economic development in their own states, as well as affecting some of the social ills that they experience. And at a time when high school dropout rates are of epidemic proportions in other states, which is what they are, in New Hampshire, we have reduced our high school dropout rate to a remarkably low 1%. And in Portsmouth, you all have reduced your high school dropout rate to 0.98%. Isn't that terrific? 0.98%. So how has that happened? It is much more than just raising the compulsory attendance age from age 16 to 18. It used to be 16, which was the result of a law passed back in 1903. And back then, kids could drop out of school and get jobs working in the mills or the farms. New Hampshire is primarily an agrarian community. But the assumption on which that law was based is now no longer valid. The kids who drop out at age 16 cannot get jobs. Even the military won't accept kids who drop out at age 16. And as we know, the social costs are high among high school dropouts. Rates of teen pregnancy, alcohol, and drug abuse are much higher among the dropout population. 80% of the prisoners in this country are high school dropouts. So we raised the compulsory attendance age, but the real successes happened at the local level, like at Portsmouth, and Dover, and Somersworth, and Rochester. The local school districts, the principals, the superintendents, the teachers have all embraced this goal. And it's so exciting to see they've developed programs unique to their own schools, unique to their own student populations, to keep the kids in school and excited about being in school. Career technical education has expanded dramatically, offering the opportunity to students to get involved in life sciences, culinary programs, engineering, and the list goes on and on and on. They have career technical education in Portsmouth that's very, very vibrant. They do more mentoring, more one-on-one mentoring with students, and more work with at-risk kids, and an effort to keep kids excited and engaged in school, and that's very positive. And I think what's happened at the local level is really what's caused that high school dropout rate to decline to almost zero, which is a goal that we have here in New Hampshire. So we need to continue to support education. I have been talking about the need here in New Hampshire, and I've talked about this before, to pass a constitutional amendment. Right now, with regard to school funding, New Hampshire is, because of the court decisions, is required to pay the first and the last dollar of what is described as an adequate education, regardless of where the student lives or regardless of the community. And I don't believe that's sound fiscal policy in terms of education funding. We need to be able to send more money to the students and to the communities who need it more than others. It's the only way I know of ensuring that children all over New Hampshire get the opportunity, an equal opportunity, for a quality education. Now, there's a debate going on in Concord right now as to what the components of that constitutional amendment should be. I support an amendment that affirms the state's responsibility for public education, It doesn't mean it does it alone, it does it along with the local communities, but the state does have a responsibility for public education, but it also allows the state to target more money to, as I said, the communities and children who need it more than others. There are some who want an amendment which would allow the legislature to let the state abandon its responsibility for public education, including setting standards. Now imagine if every SAU, if every school district set its own standards. It wouldn't work. It wouldn't even work in terms of how admissions directors at universities and colleges evaluate students. That doesn't make any sense. It is important that the State Board of Education set minimal standards, and then districts like Portsmouth and others can enhance those standards if that's what they wish to do. So whether we're able to get an agreement on an amendment, I don't know. The Senate passed an amendment that I supported. It's now in the House, and the House is debating as to which type of amendment they want. I want an amendment that allows the legislature to keep its commitment to public education, but if it does choose, for example, to eliminate the statewide property tax, if it does choose to make a decision to forever eliminate donor towns, I want the legislature to have the ability to do that. And as you know, that's where I am. Since I ran in 2004, I've been against donor towns and that concept. John and others have been very helpful to me, working with me to get us to that position to be able to do that. I have also tried in the past to eliminate the statewide property tax. So as we think about school funding, we want the legislature to have discretion to be able to target, but we don't want the state to be able to walk away from its responsibility for public education. As we think about public education, I also think a lot about public higher education. And as we talked about, I'm a graduate of UNH. I have my UNH tie on today in honor of my big brother over there. But public higher education is really important for a number of reasons. One is that we know that education drives jobs. Education is the only thing that drives jobs. If you look at the work that Ross Cattell has done, Ross is an economist at UNH. He's now chancellor of the community college system of New Hampshire. He's done studies looking at all different kind of indices that correlates with job creation. The only one he was able to find was education. The Federal Reserve, Bank of Cleveland did a recent study of all the different state economies. They looked at tax structure, they looked at climate, they looked at infrastructure. Only statistical correlation that they determined that drives jobs is education. They called it knowledge. But we need to continue to make public higher education here in New Hampshire accessible and affordable to our New Hampshire students. And that means the university system, it means the community college system. And I am very, very concerned, and I was very disturbed at the budget cuts imposed on the university system. They cut the budget by 50%. So New Hampshire, we're already 50 out of 50 in terms of state appropriation for public higher education, and the legislature cut the budget by 50%, which was the biggest cut of any state in terms of the state university system. So what does that do? It means that public higher education here in New Hampshire is less accessible and less affordable to your students, to our students here in our state. And that's not a good thing. It's not good for them, and it's not good for economic development here in New Hampshire, because education drives jobs. Right now at UNH, tuition and fees, room and board, costs in excess of $25,000. It's close to $40,000 for out-of-state students. But what is really troublesome is the average debt load that students have upon graduation, which is higher right now. It's $33,000, by the way. It's higher than the average debt load of those graduates from our competitive institutions, from BC, BU, Northeastern, Georgetown, Dartmouth. The average debt load of the students graduating from Dartmouth is around $17,000. So that will end up deterring our students that we want to send to our own university system schools. And that's a problem. The other unintended consequence of all of this is that UNH, with the other schools, we'll be in a position of being forced to accept more out-of-state students. Because out-of-state students, as I talked about, they basically pay the full boat. The appropriation that the university system gets from the state basically helps in-state students afford college and their attendance at our universities. So it's a problem, and I think we need to work hard to restore that. Even the community college system, which I think are real jewels here in New Hampshire, tuition at the community college is twice the national average. So as we think about, and you're all business people here, how we want to invest our money, I think we need to continue to put education right at the top of the list. If we invest money in education, New Hampshire will be better off. Our unemployment rate will be lower because, as I said, that's what drives jobs in our great state. I continue to focus on ways to help businesses, being a business person myself. Since I have been governor, I've reinstated job training, and we have trained over 12,000 workers at mostly manufacturing companies in partnership with the community college system, keeping those good jobs, again, mostly manufacturing jobs, right here in our state. Through job training grants, we were able to attract Albany International to Rochester, and that's a big deal. They're a $950 million company, and they could locate anywhere, and they chose to locate in New Hampshire. And that's going to have economic benefits, not only for Rochester, but for the entire Seacoast region, as well as for our state. I have promoted, working with Ross Cattell and the university, an exciting initiative called the Green Launching Pad, where they select a number of companies. They're now up to 11 companies. They're basically startup embryonic companies in the green economy sector. And they're applying all the expertise at UNH, marketing and finance and production, organizational skills to help these companies grow, and linking these companies with angel investors and venture capital private equity firms. All of the 11 companies have already added jobs, and I think some of them are really going to take off in a sector that should be good for our great state. We put in a program, which I think is pretty innovative, called New Hampshire Working, which allows those individuals who are unemployed, and even though our unemployment rate is relatively low, we still have over 30,000 people not working here in New Hampshire, collecting unemployment benefits, but allows people collecting unemployment to go to work for a company for a 6-week period of time, get their feet in the door, be able to make the case to that company that they would be a valued employee. The company can try them out, and then after a 6-week period of time, they can assess whether there's a good fit. We've been able to use those unemployment benefits to allow companies to avert layoffs, and we've also been able to use that unemployment money to help train workers, give them certificates in specialized areas like lean manufacturing. So we're doing a lot in terms of trying to get people back to work, trying to keep our unemployment rate down, and that's what the focus, by the way, should be. We should be talking about jobs and the economy. You all have been following, I'm sure, what's going on in Concord in the State House. You know, and there's a lot of issues that they're debating, a lot of issues that are taking a lot of the oxygen that's being discussed, and we should be focusing on jobs and the economy. One of the areas that I'm very proud of, and this is really affecting the Seacoast, is all the work that we've done with the infrastructure over here, which is really quite remarkable when you look at it all. The Spalding Turnpike, the widening of the Spalding Turnpike, about a $100 million project, will be completed in 2013. That is really significant for the Seacoast. It's opening up the corridor from Rochester right to Portsmouth. And that will spawn economic development in ways that we can't even imagine right now. We're also going to reconstruct about 21 bridges, a number of which were on the red listed bridge list by the time we're done. When I first went over there, you know, you look under the bridges, and obviously you're familiar with the nets that are under the bridges, right, to keep the debris from falling on the cars. But I also saw these wood pilings that had come off kilter in places, and wood pilings that were put in place back in 1992 for the purpose of prolonging the bridges a year. And nothing had been done since. So that is a project that's well worth it. It's going to help quality of life. It's going to help economic development. You all know what's going on with the Memorial Bridge. That bridge had to be replaced. Someone on the way over, John, you should take this up as an economic development opportunity, suggested we put a zip line. Jay, you could do this in your retirement. Jay could make some money out of this. You know, a zip line from New Hampshire, maybe right into the shipyard. I'm sure we've got lots of takers on that. But Memorial Bridge, $80 million, $20 million Tiger grant in partnership with Maine. You know, after lots of discussions, we've got Maine on board. They got other priorities as well. That will be done by 2013. We obviously will be starting the Sarah Long Bridge in 2014. The Little Bay Bridges on the first phase will be done in 2013. And you know what? I've had more positive feedback of all the construction projects that we've done over here on the seacoast and actually in New Hampshire on open road tolling in Hampton. I mean, that is significant. It costs about $20 million. But just think about it. All the tourists that come into New Hampshire, it used to be their last memory of their great vacation in New Hampshire was waiting in line for 5 hours in traffic backed up to the Portsmouth traffic circle to get through the tolls. I mean, that's not the way you want people to think about New Hampshire, as they just enjoyed a wonderful vacation in our great state. Now, their last memory is zipping right through those tolls with no wait. So I think it's really a good example of dollars invested very, very well. And we're going to do the same thing, by the way, in Portsmouth, and then ultimately in Bedford. I think open road tolling is really the way to go. So in terms of infrastructure, I think we're doing quite well. Certainly, we've had a lot of very successful projects here on the seacoast. The budget, the state budget, we're doing relatively well. We finished last fiscal year, and our fiscal year ends June 30th. We finished last fiscal year with a $17 million surplus. So the budget has been balanced each of the last 7 years. There's a debate in Concord as to whether that money should go into the rainy day fund. Now, I love rainy day funds. I was able to build it up significantly before we had the economic collapse. The difficulty with putting it in the rainy day fund is the legislature, when they put their budget together, they had a built-in $14 million deficit at the end of this fiscal year. And we need to have a balanced budget. It's important for fiscal responsibility, it's important for the rating agency. So we're going to need that $17 million surplus to finance the deficit that was built into the budget. If there's money left over, I'm happy to have a discussion about putting it in the rainy day fund, but we need to ensure a balanced budget. Right now, in this fiscal year, we're about $10 million ahead of plan, $13 million ahead of the prior year. That's not including what is called the Medicaid Enhancement Act. Some of you are familiar with what's been going on to the hospitals. The legislature cut a collective $300 million from the hospital budgets, the so-called dish payments. The hospitals have protested that. They withheld a significant amount of money to the tune of about $40 million. I think when all is said and done, they'll end up making those payments. So I think that we'll end up okay in terms of our budget for this fiscal year and next year. So financially, we're okay, just in terms of the numbers. But I still, as I mentioned, I worry about the cuts to the university system as well as the huge cuts to the hospitals, which I think ultimately will drive up healthcare costs here in New Hampshire. I think the last thing I would talk about very briefly, and then we can open up to whatever questions you have, is the tone that's going on in Concord. You know, since I was elected in 2004, I really worked hard to try to put party politics to one side and work with people. You know, I've never cared, and those of you who know me know this, I've never cared whether somebody is a Democrat or Republican or an independent. I care whether they want to work with me to solve problems in a very pragmatic way, to create opportunities for other people who need our help, and there are people in New Hampshire who do need our help. I mean, that's the way it should work. And do it in a way that's civil, where we can disagree, but we can still be civil toward and with each other. And I think there's been a lack of civility in the State House that's bothersome. It's bothersome to me, and it's bothersome to many, many people who've been there in previous years. So I think we need to restore that type of civility and communication, which ultimately leads to trust. And without trust, just like in your businesses, you can't get stuff done. People always ask me what I'm going to do after I finish this job, and I don't yet know. I still have 10 months to go. But I can tell you I really, really have enjoyed being governor of the great state. It has been an honor for me that I can't ever describe to you. To be governor of the greatest state in the country is truly, truly special. And I will always, always, always remember this wonderful opportunity. Thank you very much for inviting me here this morning.